everybody. It's Dr. Bridget Young from babyformulaexpert.com here on a glorious Friday back in Denver to talk about the new CDC breast pump guidelines. FYI, the boys are playing behind the camera, so hopefully everything remains calm. I don't have to rush in there. And before we get started, as from mom to mom, Vaughn has now crossed the border of now he's closer to 2 than he is to 1, and oh, is it starting to show. Vaughn is a rage vomiter. If you have one, you know what I mean. If you don't, be glad. Where he can make himself vomit on cue if he's really mad. So he gets really mad at, the most stupid 2-year-old things like, no, you may not play with that knife. You have to have at least one bite of your entire meal. No, bleh, vomit. Oh my God, it's driving me crazy. Anyway, so far we've been vomit free today, but dinner is still coming, so there's still time. Anyway, that venting out of the way, I now feel great. We're going to be talking about the new CDC breast pump guidelines. I actually had several moms send this to me because they read it and kind of panicked. So the CDC previously did not have official, I already had red wine, I can see that my teeth are red. The CDC previously did not have official guidelines or instructions about how to clean your breast pump, but everybody gets at least instructions in their breast pump when they get their kit, and your doctor probably talked to you about it. Anyway, here's the saga. I'll give you all the details. A precious little baby got extremely ill from a very rare but very serious infection. It was traced back to contamination of her mother's breast pump parts. And thus the CDC responded to this by issuing new guidelines about how to properly clean and store breast pump parts. Here's the kicker. The guidelines are, in my opinion, a little effing extreme for a healthy term baby. Enough so that they're almost inhibitory to a lot of women's working conditions. That's why I say they're extreme, in my opinion, because they're enough that if some people thought, if the choice was to adhere by these guidelines or not pump, I could see a lot of people deciding not to pump. So here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to go over their guidelines. I'm going to review the case of the baby who got extremely ill, and then I'm going to give you my personal recommendations about how to keep your breast pump and your breast milk as safe as possible while actually living in the real world if you're a working mom or you ever have to leave your home at any time for any reason. Hey, gentle touches. Oh, gosh, sorry. Vaughn Forrest Young. That is unkind. That is unkind. Apologize to your brother. That's got to be like the most professional thing you've ever seen, right? Gentle. Gentle. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. We're just going to keep going for as long as this holds. Okay, thanks. Oh, hi, Sabrina. Thanks. My kids are literally trying to kill each other. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to grab him. Oh, my gosh. Vaughn. Hey. No. That is unkind. Unkind. Hello. Here's my slightly cranky 2-year-old. Okay. So here, no, mommy's gonna hold this. So here are the breast pump guidelines from the CDC, which actually sound pretty normal, but they say that every single time you use your breast pump, first you wash your hands before you pump. Fair enough. Then disinfect the surface of that you're pumping on and the surface of the breast pump. We'll try this. Which may or may not be possible if you're on a construction site or in your car. Let's see. And then pump. After you pump, store the milk appropriately immediately into the refrigerator, into a pack with an ice pack, like a little lunch bag. And then here's where the recommendations are used. They want you to use a dedicated wash basin. This doesn't mean a dedicated sink, but get like a big plastic bowl or one of those big washing tubs that you are only going to use to wash your breast pump parts. Then rinse off your parts, not touching them to the sink. So being careful not to touch your breast pump parts to the sink, rinse them with water, put them in the basin, and then wash all of your parts with soap and, a bottle brush or a dedicated sponge. Rinse them off again, being careful not to touch them to the sink, and then air dry them on a paper towel, not on a towel. Then once they're completely air dry, put them into an airtight container, like a Tupperware or a Ziploc bag. Again, they have to be 100% dry. So that's quite a lot for most people's working conditions and the amount of time they have in their pumping break. And then they suggest, or I've heard people extrapolate to say that if you are unable to comply to these conditions, it would be better to purchase a different breast pump kit for every time you pump than to reuse. So if you're going to pump 4 times a day at work, you have 4 breast pump kits, and then you wash them all at night when you get home. Now, I am still a breastfeeding mom. God help me. I do not pump at work anymore, but I did for a long time. I tell you, I did not really adhere to these recommendations, or they weren't made then. But the only thing worse than pumping at work is cleaning the breast pump parts when you get home. It's such a god-awful job. Anyway, so I read these and I wanted to cry on behalf of every working mom who's pumping out there. Oh my God, your job is so hard. My heart goes out to you. Keep up the amazing work. I think there's ways that you can feel safe about your breast pumping practices if you're unable to comply to every part of these guidelines. My biggest fear is that people are going to read these and say, that's impossible. I'm pumping in a bathroom, or I drive, or, there's a million reasons why you might not be able to do all these things, and then they give up breastfeeding. I would hate for that to happen. I think there's a lot of ways, again, you can go about pumping very safely, even if you can't do all of these steps from the CDC. So why did the CDC put out these guidelines? Well, this is why. A baby recently got extremely ill from a very rare condition called Chronobacter sakazaki, or if you're in the medical note, it's usually just known as Chronobacter. It's a bacteria. It's extremely rare. It really only affects infants or extremely ill people. There's cases a year. It's like in the dozens, not even 100. So again, incredibly rare. And this baby did get this infection and suffered extraordinary health outcomes. So extremely ill. The baby suffered irreversible brain damage. It's a terrible story, and my heart and compassion go out to this poor baby's family. However, her case is very unusual for many reasons. One, she was born at 29 weeks gestation. That's incredibly early. That's right on the cusp of whether or not we're convinced we can keep a baby that young alive. So she was born at 29 weeks, which means an incredibly compromised immune system. The peak of her infection was 21 days after she was born. So again, most babies would still be cooking for a long time at that point. And then, again, they were able to trace the source of the infection to breast pump parts. That, God bless, this poor mother is pumping for her baby in the NICU. I can't imagine the heartache this mother is going through. But one of the reasons that the bacteria was able to basically infect the breast pump parts and thus infect the baby was mom was not washing her parts appropriately. She would pump and then soak the breast pump parts in lukewarm water with soap for about 3 to 4 hours and then just let them air dry. So she was never actually scrubbing them, and she never sanitized them, either in the dishwasher or with a breast milk sanitization bag in the microwave. So those are really big deals. So first of all, that's not a good idea. I'll talk about that. It's never a good idea to just soak the breast pump parts in lukewarm water. And again, this baby was particularly susceptible to catch an infection and then also to not be able to fight an infection. So it was a very rare circumstance. Not to belittle this poor family's suffering, but if you have a healthy term baby or an older baby, I really don't think these conditions, even if the baby were to come in contact with this particular bacteria, your baby would probably just be able to respond immediately and you would never even know. So that's why the CDC responded with these relatively strict guidelines. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 2 seconds of microbiology so you understand how bacteria grow, so you know how to keep it from growing. And then I'm going to give you some suggestions about how to tweak these guidelines if, again, you're in the car or something like that, or if it's financially unfeasible for your family to purchase 4 breast pump kits, which is a lot of money. You'll be able to feel good about what you're doing. So one, bacteria is everywhere. Some of it's healthy. Probiotics are bacteria. Some of it's horrible, like Cronobacter. I just walked by, gave a nice whack to the tripod for good measure. Breast milk is extremely antimicrobial. So I've seen research at my very nerdy conferences presented where they have less, doing storage experiments to see at what point breast milk is no longer good to be able to fed to baby. And it's way past our guidelines. Like breast milk in the fridge that they left up there for like 3 weeks still had no bacteria. The kicker that I remember from this particular research group, that they were in North Carolina, was they left breast milk on the counter for 12 hours and they put it in the refrigerator for 12 hours. And at the end of the 12 hours, the breast milk that had been sitting on the counter that whole time had less bacteria than the breast milk in the refrigerator. And they thought this was probably because there's so much antimicrobial properties in breast milk that the breast milk actually killed off a lot of the bacteria at room temperature. So in general, breast milk is the most antimicrobial fluid that you could be dealing with. So that covers a lot of your bases already. It's not like normal milk or oil or something else which could grow mold or fungus quickly. Breast milk's pretty dang hardy stuff. And then when you're dealing with bacteria, the things that you want to know is that when you put bacteria in cold, this is the whole purpose of our refrigerator. So any bacteria, but including those in milk, when you put bacteria in cold temperatures, it slows everything down. It slows down all their cellular processes, which means it slows down their ability to replicate. And you need a lot of bacteria to cause an infection. So if we can keep them from replicating so that they never reach that critical mass of infection, we've done our job. So that's the whole purpose of your refrigerator, but we can use that to our advantage with breast pumps as well. And then also liquids. In general for bacteria, it's much easier for them to grow in liquid than dried, which is why bacteria grows in your milk really quick versus in your dried milk powder or your formula. It doesn't just spread like wildflowers because they have easier access to nutrients. They can move around more quickly, that kind of a stuff in liquid. So how do we take all that nerd stuff and put it into reasonable practice for your everyday pumping mom who might not be able to take a 45-minute pumping break every 3 hours? All right, before I get into this, I have to be extremely clear. This is just my personal opinion. If you are able to do all of the CDC's recommendations, please do it. It's by far the absolute safest way to go about things. If you can't, these are just my personal suggestions about how you might be sure that your pumping is safe. Again, if you're unable to do what they recommend. 1, if at all possible, wash your hands before. Again, if you're in a car or you're on a construction site or anywhere, keep hand sanitizer in your breast pump bag and at least sanitize your hands. Use a little alcohol on your hands. And this is just so if you have any bacteria on your hands, which you definitely do, when you touch your breast to get the pump hooked up and everything, you don't accidentally add bacteria to your milk and your pump. 2, when you are done, again, if you can go through the whole washing process if possible, do it. If not, here's sort of the next best things to go down the line. If you can rinse off the breast pump parts, if you have access to a sink, but you don't necessarily have time or access or resources to wash them all, rinse the breast pump parts and then air dry them on a paper towel, if that's possible. If you don't have a paper towel, just air dry them as much as possible. So, how might that be? Here's what I want to get at. You don't want to air dry them on a towel. You don't want the breast pump parts, once they've been rinsed or washed, to be on anything that might have bacteria in it. A towel can have a lot of bacteria growing in it inside the fibers. A paper towel, in theory, will have less because it's disposable. So if you're in your car and you're able to rinse them somehow, I'd rather you put them in a Ziploc bag, leave the Ziploc bag open so they're still able to dry, than to leave them on your car seat. Because if they touch your car seat's going to have a lot of bacteria on it from all those people's bottoms sitting on it. So that's what you just have to think about, how much exposure to bacteria your breast pump parts are going to have, and then make the best choice. I don't want you to seal the Ziploc bag if the parts have still any residual moisture, because that will lock the moisture in and help bacteria to grow. Like mold goes and bacteria grow more in a humid environment than a dry environment. I hope that makes sense. If you don't have access to any of those things, something you can do is, like, if you can't rinse or wash or anything your breast pump parts, but you have access to a refrigerator, I'd say put the whole thing in the refrigerator before you use it the next time, because again, if there is any bacteria on the parts, that's going to slow down the growth of the bacteria so that it doesn't have time to flourish in between your pumping sessions. Yes, so those are the things to do if you don't have a sink. So just think about how bacteria grow and do your very best to diminish bacterial growth and bacterial exposure to your breast pump parts. When you are able to wash, like I was very lucky, I work at a hospital, we have a break room, so we had a sink, and I did most of these. I did dry my breast pump parts on a towel, which now I feel really bad about. Paper towel would be better. If you can wash them, the reason they don't want you touching them to the sink is people wash all their nasty dishes in a sink. You clean your chicken, your raw chicken in the sink, so the sink is kind of a high bacterial place, so they just don't want your breast pump parts even coming into contact with the sink. If you drop a flange into the sink, don't panic. It's totally fine. Just wash it. So more so than being this dedicated sink thing, if possible, get yourself a big plastic bowl and only use that bowl to help wash your parts. Don't panic if you don't have one right away. The most important thing that I want to get across is it is really important that you have a dedicated bottle brush and sponge. If you use a sponge, do not use your household sponge, or definitely like the break room sponge, on your breast pump parts, because even if you're using soap, that thing is nasty. It washes all your dishes, it washes who knows what. It's worth the 39 cents to get a different sponge that you only use for breast pump parts, or a bottle brush that you only use for breast pump parts. When I'm at home, I think it's fine to use a brush, again, my personal opinion, for breast pump parts and bottles, because that also could contaminate the baby in theory. So one, you don't use your bottle brush on your family dishes. It's just for bottles and breast pump parts. And then the big thing, which I've already kind of gone over, is drying. So, sorry, I should have said to wash with just soap and water is fine. You have your dedicated bowl. If you don't have a dedicated bowl, just pick one from your mixing bowls, call it the breast pump bowl, put it in your breast pumping corner of your kitchen, and just use it for that while you're still nursing. So, and then when drying, I already went over this. Don't put your stuff on a towel. Get a whole corner of your kitchen. If you have an office, a corner of your office. If you don't have an office, you're doing the best you can within these guidelines. If you have to put things back into your breast pump bag, hopefully I gave you some tips about how to do that safely. But at home, when you're pumping at home, you have a corner. It's got your dedicated wash bowl. It has a corner where you dry your breast pump parts. Either put a paper towel down and then put your breast pump parts on top to dry. Before you do that, I'd like it if you used a disinfectant wipe, so you keep that corner clean and you just don't do anything else in that corner. You don't use it for prep, nothing. It's lost space while you have a baby. It stinks, but you've lost more, to be honest. Or I'm totally fine with those. Everybody seems to have them now, the bottle dryers that look like a lawn of grass. They're exactly designed for this. So there's airflow through, and the bottle and breast pump parts never touch the bottom where all the liquid gathers. It just touches the little grass. I have one right here. I'm totally fine with that. And then once a week or once every other week, you sterilize everything in the dishwasher. Take all your pumps, all your pump parts, all your bottles. You're probably doing this anyway with your bottles. Take the grass and the tray, if you're using the grass tray, and just put them in the dishwasher and run it on the highest temperature. All commercial breast pumps now are made to be able to withstand that sterilization wash. And that way you don't have to worry about buying the sterilization bags or all of that jazz. So I hope that is helpful. I hope that gives you a little more comfort and hope if you saw these guidelines and totally panicked because you don't have the time or the resources at work to be able to do this every day. So the take home is think about how bacteria would grow. Think about how your breast pump may potentially be exposed to bacteria, and just make simple choices every chance you can to minimize that. So if possible, air dry or dry in a paper towel or leave in the refrigerator. There's lots of things that you can do that is not quite as great as washing and air drying every single time, but is going to get your baby 99.9% of the way there if you have a healthy term baby. I always say this whole channel is for healthy term babies. If you have a sick baby or a NICU baby or have any sort of metabolic concern, you really have to speak with your doctor and you really have to take extra precaution. But for the average baby, they are robust little things. And the effort that you're making to just produce this breast milk is so healthy for them. I would hate for you to diminish that effort because you're worried about infecting them somehow. It's almost like a conflict of interest. The breast milk is so protective to them that denying them because you're worried about not being able to adhere to these guidelines is just such a sad potential scenario to me. If you have any questions that I might be able to answer, please leave them in the link. Again, this is just my personal recommendation and how I've kind of incorporated some of these tips into my own life as a working, I'm no longer pumping, but I was pumping mom. And I hope it's encouraging to some of you guys. I salute all you pumping moms out there. My hat off to you. It's a hard job and you're doing an awesome job. I will see you guys next week. Have an awesome weekend. Bye.